everyone. Welcome to the first episode of my special series of podcasts, Divorce Talks with Irwin Mitchell. Today, we're going to talk about divorce disasters and success stories, and especially what makes the difference between your divorce going smoothly or turning into War of the Roses. So to talk about this, I've invited Zahra Pabani. Zahra is a family law partner at Irwin Mitchell with over 20 years experience supporting clients in the UK and internationally. Ranked as a Tier 1 lawyer by Chambers and Partners and Legal 500, she specializes in high-value financial settlements and complex family matters. Drawing on extensive courtroom and negotiation experience, Zahra has seen firsthand both the best and the worst outcomes divorce can bring. Zahra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chloe. It's great to be here.
I'm looking forward to picking your brain because I know you've been in the trenches for a while. Could you share with us, maybe we'll start with the darker side, and divorce often gets a bad reputation as a traumatic experience. Can you share with us an example of one of the hardest cases you've worked on that's been particularly challenging and that stood out in that sense in terms of all the cases you've seen before?
I can, and I'm going to do that for you. What I want to tell you before I tell you about it is that this was quite a long time ago, and I do think times have changed. But I'm going to tell you my worst experience, which was there was a couple, and they'd been married a long time, and they made that decision, which is a tricky decision, to stay together for the children. So they stayed together probably longer than they should, with good intent, but it backfired. So they became entrenched, they became bitter, and that longevity, staying in that marriage for longer than they should have, hurt them. And it hurt them painfully. And it did bring out that kind of battle, defensive fight focus for them both, actually. So I was acting for the wife, and the husband had instructed another firm. And as I say, this was a long time ago, without the mediation and counselling focuses that we have now. And me being me, because I've always had this way, I thought, well, I don't know this lawyer, so I'm going to pick up the phone and say hi and see what we can do. So I picked up the phone, and unfortunately, it was one of those situations whereby the lawyer was as entrenched as the client.
Oh, no.
So I felt, well, as a lawyer, it is our client's problem. Now, we're team client. We are totally team client, and we carry them, but it's their problem, and we should be able to stand back objectively and help them make objective decisions.
Yes.
Now, this lawyer had taken a slightly different tact and took all the client's problems as if they were that person's, if they were that lawyers. And I try to say, hey, listen, this isn't, it's not our divorce, it's the client's divorce. Let's stand back and let's try and work through this together, because I felt there were some obvious things that we could do to help them immediately. But it didn't work. So it was my one experience a long time ago where I had a lawyer who I couldn't win over. So I was really disappointed, because you feel like you failed then. And then basically there was 4 of us in this case, and 3 people wanted a battle. So I had to get on board and go in, and we litigate as well as settle and negotiate. But you want to at least attempt a settlement and negotiation first. But this was going to be a battle. On day one, it was going to be a battle. A battle on day one for a year is exhausting for everybody. And the money that is spent on that is wasted on that, I found that incredibly difficult.
I can imagine. And I'm sure there was a huge role of the emotions in all this. It wasn't, as you say, it wasn't rational thinking. They were very much driven by that resentment, weren't they?
They were, and it was so emotionally charged in so many different ways. And like with clients, I always try to say to them, you've got these 2-3 beautiful children, try not to regret your marriage or the early days of it, but for that, you wouldn't have had them. And perhaps once upon a time, you did love that person. And there was something there. I know it's died and it's waned and it's painful now. But if we can just hook into that thing, and we've got these kids, can we try and remember that? But in this case, we couldn't, in particular. In lots of cases, the clients struggle with that, understandably. But the emotions were so heavily charged that people were arguing over an emotion or a point or a principle that wasn't in the long term going to get them anywhere. Short term, they thought that it would give them a little gain or a little win. Whereas long term, it wasn't going to achieve anything other than cost money. And that's what emotions can do. And they do need to be set, as you know, Chloe, the emotion. You can't help but have emotion in a case. And a family lawyer, regardless of whether you have any mediation training or counselling training, we are therapists to a certain extent. And a really good family lawyer can do that, but knows their boundaries.
Yeah.
And they know when it's time to refer to a counsellor, to a mediator, to a coach, to a therapist, to a doctor. You know, they know to bring in other professionals. And I think that's just so important, identifying when.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that's exactly where things go wrong, is when it becomes a battle of egos almost, and this
Absolutely.
need for emotional justice. And it's something that I have a lot of similar conversations to yours with clients, just accepting that this is really a business conversation. It's a negotiation, and it's not really about emotional justice, nor does the justice system provide that day in court sense of, I finally got, recognized in the harm I was caused, especially since we've had no-fault divorce.
No, absolutely. And it is business, but it is different to business. It's good to try and focus them on the kind of practical elements of their divorce. Yeah. And it's good to really kind of get through on that basis and do, if it's finances, do their disclosure and go through the steps and the process and think strategically.
Yeah.
But the reality is, we can give them, we can make sure they have support on the emotion. But I think we all know day to day as family lawyers, they are emotional decisions. They might be business decisions, but leaving your home can never just, or selling your home in a family case can't just be a business transaction. Whether it's when you're happily married or happily with somebody, you're selling your house and moving to your next one, it's a transaction. But in this scenario, it's never going to be a business transaction. Yeah. It's going to be a painful bereavement, and it's going to be a loss. And I understand that. And it's really important that we all understand that for clients. But then giving them that support. So perhaps, like you do, Chloe, you'll see a client, I know, pre maybe a big meeting or pre maybe a big court case, and they will offload.
Yes.
So because they need to get it off their chest.
Of course.
So it's either with you or it's with somebody else. But where you don't want it is when they're giving evidence, or whether they're in the courtroom or a private FDR. A little bit it comes out in mediation, and I think that's okay. I say, when my client says, I'm just going to cry, and I'm going to say, well, I think that might be okay. If you spend the whole session in tears, that might be tricky. But if you try, you're showing your true emotion, and then you've got to try and hold yourself together again to be able to make the points that need making to try to get to where you need to go. So some emotion is okay, even on the stand when, people are giving evidence and they show their emotion. That's okay, but let's just make sure that you can breathe, take a breath, and make the points you need to make for you or for your children, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. So that's quite interesting then, in contrast, and maybe you can share with us a story of a divorce that went particularly well. And were emotions less raw in that case, or was that the main differentiator?
So the first one I told you was very, very entrenched. But this next one I'm going to tell you about, they didn't agree on anything. Okay, so it was divorce, children, and finances, and they didn't agree on anything. And they both had lawyers, and they decided to both, for separate reasons, they were both leaving those lawyers, instructing new lawyers, and they wanted to litigate. And they were kind of clear on that in a measured sort of way, actually. Look, we've been through all of this, we've done all of this, we know we want to do this. So I said to the client, okay, but in this day and age, we have to mediate. You're going to have to do that. But I was thinking, now, when I send people to mediation, I'm kind of like, right, come on. This is a real opportunity to save a lot of money, save a lot of heartache, really, really do something that works for you and your family better than the court system can do and better than the lawyers can do. On this one, if I'm going to be honest with you, I thought, we probably are going through the motions and ticking a box, because I feel I feel like they've done everything they can to date. But we always obviously go to a really good mediator. So we went to a really good mediator. Well, blow me, it worked. I literally was so shocked and surprised. And the clients had some counselling, which was good. Yeah. But you know what I think helped a little, maybe, that was slightly different, maybe, perhaps, is that when I send a client to mediation, we offer mediation support, okay? So we have an in-house mediator, and we offer support to them, whether it be us or our mediators say, let me tell you what this is going to look like and feel like. And the one thing that I often say to clients is, the best way, the most impactful way to start a mediation is to disarm the other side by saying something super, super positive that they might not expect. So, for example, saying, if it's about children, I just want to start by saying, I'm really sorry that we're here today. I'm so sad and sorry we're here today. And I know you love our children, and I know our children love you. And that's important. And I think our children are a credit to us. And that can change the energy in the room.
Yes, right off the bat.
Absolutely. Well, I said that to this client who I thought, well, we're never going to get anywhere. They're going to mediation to tick a box, and we're going to court, because they'd really tried.
Yeah.
And she said to me, I'm not going to be able to say that, Zahra. I'm just not going to be able to say that. We're too far gone for that. Mm-hmm. She went in, something happened to her. She said it, and it worked. And it changed the energy. It changed the room. And they started talking about a couple of things, and they got a couple of quick wins and it just developed. And they came out and they said, I think we want to do that again. And then within, I think off the top of my head, it was about 6 sessions. Yeah. And they, all we did was some drafting at the end. They barely
so they resolved it all.
It was wonderful. We talked about whether it was going to be hybrid and whether the solicitors needed to come into focus. Yeah. But the mediator we used, they were so strong, that they really, really said, listen, we'll think about that. We might need it. But they were able to do everything. They both went back to lawyers to say, now go talk about that and then come back again. Yeah. And so it was a very holistic approach. But it was incredible. And it was on one where even I thought, no, it's not going to happen. So it can.
And that's what makes it so interesting, actually, because you would think that your best case scenario was one where people were still very friendly together and really, there was that kind of kumbaya moment. But actually, they had started feeling quite entrenched, and they managed to shift. And so what do you think it boiled down to?
I think it was her disarming the room in that way. I think that did help. And I think they'd spent quite a long, maybe 6 months with other lawyers, 6 to 8 months with other lawyers. And I think choosing a really great mediator, great mediator.
That makes a big difference.
And it was a different voice in the room, just a different voice in the room, and a change of feeling and circumstance. And I think they were both war weary already.
Yes.
And who really wants to go in, really and truly, when you boil it down, there is a minority who want to fight, a minority, not a majority. Yeah. And I think they just thought, what are we doing? They had one of them had the light bulb moment, and the other saw it.
Yeah. And jumped on the bandwagon and thought, okay, let's do this.
And isn't it funny how you can change something in that moment by a look or a word, usually a positive word, you know? Kindness is a superpower, isn't it, Chloe? Kindness is a superpower. And I think sometimes being kind to the other side is a superpower to make it more conducive to settlement. Be kind. I always say to my clients, if you're kind about the smaller things, the bigger things will follow. Kindness makes everybody more conducive to discussion, negotiation and settlement.
And it's more likely to create a mirror effect as well. People react to feeling attacked by attacking back. If you're actually unthreatening and trying to be kind and understanding, it makes them lower their guard. It makes the other side mirror your behavior. And that's exactly what we want to do. And I think a lot of people feel like, I've had so many clients tell me, my divorce is not going well because of my ex. And there's always that sense that it's the other person's fault. But in a lot of cases, it is. They're both responsible. But there's a lot you can do as an individual to change that dynamic, and I think that's really important. A really important message to send through, because it really changes the whole atmosphere in the room as soon as one of the two changes.
This is how I phrase it. Non-legal tactics. So you should have a strategy. You should have a plan of action. You shouldn't just be processing and going through the motions.
Agreed.
You should be really thinking, well, where are we aiming and how are we going to get there? And what do we need to do? And what kind of information do we need to gather, and how do we need to present our case? We need a strategy. Non-legal tactics. Kindness, agreeing the small things, conceding some points, knowing, listen, I'm willing to give this if I can get this. Well, then give it, having a bracket and being realistic. And, if you're both living together and you're both going to court that day, or you're both going to a private FDR that day, or a mediation, talk about who's going to look after the kids. Have an honest conversation. Say, well, we're both going to need to see our solicitor. What should we do? Should we tag team it? How should we do this? Who's going to pick up the kids? Have a conversation that you can actually work on and achieve between you. Settle what's going to happen that day. And that'll pave the way. It should start paving the way. Small things matter. People forget that. Really, really small things matter.
Yeah. But what happens is people get caught in this dynamic and this dance that they have. It's very hard to break when, you've been married to someone 10, 20, 30 years, and it's been this ongoing pattern. So you mentioned a few strategies, and one of them I want to pick on, because that's one that I share with my clients as well, is focusing on those quick wins, starting with things that you can both agree on. even if it's just agreeing that you both need to resolve the child arrangements,
Yeah.
but starting with that common ground so that you're shifting the dynamic. It's no longer me versus you. It's we now have a joint problem that we need to resolve, and it's in both of our interests to do that. And so it creates that teaming effect where you're more creative, more open to suggestions, and it's not me pushing my solution versus you pushing yours. Did you have any other strategies that you use in these kind of cases to try and help, save the day?
It is not helpful when you are sitting with your spouse or soon to be ex-spouse or in a home and you're having a conversation and they say something and you're thinking, well, I'm never going to do that in a million years. And so, but you immediately say no.
Yeah,
no,
agreed.
That doesn't help. Even if that is your plan is that I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Take a breath and say, let me write that down and I'm going to think about it. Even if if you just keep saying no, we're not going to get anywhere. So if they say 3 things and you're thinking, well, I'm not going to do any of that, that's just never going to happen in a million years. So let me write them down.
Yeah.
Because then it gives you some time to calm your emotions. Write them down and say, I'm struggling with this, but I'm going to think about it. I promise you I'm going to think about it. Don't say no immediately.
Agreed.
Because actually the fact that the other person thinks that they maybe expected a no.
Yeah,
and the fact that you say, they're actually going to think about it. Oh, well, maybe I'll give on something else then, if they're going to think about it. And it doesn't mean that you're going to accept it. It means that you maybe speak to somebody, you about it, Chloe, or me about it as a lawyer. Maybe you are going to talk about it. Why not? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, explore it. Why not?
Maybe that you're going to have to go back and say no, but we can think of the delivery of the no. Mm-hmm. We can really, really think about that to make it more palatable.
Yeah.
So don't just sit there and say, no, 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 no. Sit there and say, I'm going to write down, I'm going to think about it.
Yeah. And it's true because actually, if you're thinking of the bigger picture, your objective is to find an agreement. That's a personal, individual objective. And saying no is not getting you there because you're closing doors. You're making the conversation stop. What I often tell people is to say, tell me more. So I had a client recently whose husband is suggesting nesting. And she keeps saying, that'll never work. That'll never work. Well, what? Let him talk about it. Explain how that works in practice. How do you see it happening? Explore it. First of all, you might still end up with a no, but at least he'll have had the opportunity to share his thoughts, to be heard. He won't feel like he was, rejected right off the bat. And I think that's really important, keeping that conversation open and helping the other person feel heard. And it's helpful to know what the other person cares about and what it is they're trying to push.
Absolutely. I mean, you and I both know, as does everybody, it's not rocket science. Communication is key to success in business, in your personal relationships, in your friendships, in your families. Communication is key. And we know as well that it's the communication that goes, and that's often when relationships start to fail. Absolutely. Particularly when you've got young children and you're really busy and you think you're communicating about the children, but you're not really. You're just saying A, B, C, D.
Transactional conversations.
Exactly. So communication is key. And it's interesting, your communication has failed. It's at rock bottom, but it's what we need you to hone in on completely and utterly to get into your divorce. And people, so therefore, having the lawyer or you or the mediator or whoever it is to help you with that communication. So, take a step back. Once upon a time we communicated effectively. How did we do that? What was that about? Now, it might have been a really long time ago and you might have completely changed. So you might have to change that thought process, but maybe start there. We did communicate well once upon a time. How can I get that back again? How can I make that work? Particularly if you've got children. We always used to say, Chloe, oh, well, you've got young children, so you'll need to communicate. Now it doesn't matter whether they're young or old. Kids don't leave home, so
you do, exactly.
Kids could be in their 20s and you are going to have to communicate forever and a day about your children. So we've kind of learned that it doesn't matter how old they are anymore. So because you know that and that you want to be at graduations, weddings and christenings, you really want to. And your child wants both of you there. So navigating a way through, and it might not happen immediately. And it may be that your communication is going to be so poor that actually it is better to just leave it to the solicitor. Maybe that is it. And maybe, I hate to think that's it, but sometimes it is it. Sometimes it is. But having the presence of mind to know I'm not going to be able to do this right now. Let me give it to you. And then having some coaching, some counselling to think about how you're going to open your voice again.
Yeah. And time does help. I've noticed that with a lot of clients. Animosity tends to go down a bit. and people usually, are able to move on. But it's true that when you're in the heart of the moment, it's very hard to disassociate your emotions from your decisions.
It is.
So, Zahra, what would you say? I guess this is a bit of a trick question, but if you had to choose the most important thing that a client can do to make sure that their divorce goes smoothly, what would you recommend?
I think you need to choose the right lawyer. I honestly do. But I think you need to know your lawyer.
Yeah.
So just choosing a lawyer because, their credentials look good, or somebody else told me, you need to get on with this person. You are trusting them with something so big in your life. Yeah. But I think you need to ask them almost non-legal questions. You kind of need to say, what is your view on mediation and counselling? Have you ever done it? Mm-hmm. Have you ever been to court yourself personally? How do you deal with conflict with the other side? What would be your go-to? Will you write a letter or will you ring them? Mm-hmm. I think really do you work? And I bet they don't ask. Do you work full time? Are you available full time?
Yeah.
How many counsellors do you know? How many divorce coaches do you know? Do you ever listen to any podcasts? Is there any that you can recommend? Find out about your lawyer personally, and in that initial meeting, and not everywhere, but in lots of organizations, lots of really good stellar organizations, you can get an initial free meeting, even if it's a paid meeting or a free meeting, use a little portion of that meeting to ask some questions to get to know your lawyer, because I think that's key. Because once you get the right lawyer who is well connected and has divorce coaches, has counsellors, has mediators, knows and understands the framework. A lawyer who just gives you one option, I don't rate that very much. Saying, listen, we'll do a few letters, we'll do a bit of negotiation, and if it doesn't work, we'll go to court. No. There are so many wide variety of options out there. And so I think that's really important. And as people come to us, I spoke to somebody the other week, and I said, you don't need a lawyer. You absolutely don't need a lawyer. You just need to do this. You need to go to mediation. Let me tell you who to use, and you just need to have this conversation. And you actually really need to concede that point, because that's never going to happen in a million years. So I've had a couple recently where I've said, you don't need us. You just need to, you can sort this out yourself. You just need to go do this. So make sure you've got somebody who you can trust so much, but also that you can get on with, that you're happy to have a cup of tea with after court.
Yes, because you're going to have a few conversations with them.
Absolutely. So building your rapport with it's incumbent upon a solicitor to build a rapport with a client, as it is incumbent upon you, Chloe. We are the professionals. Mm-hmm. So we need to build this rapport and relationship with our client, a professional one. But in the case of the family world, it goes a little bit more beyond professional. You need that emotional IQ with your client. So I would say choose well and choose right. Go see 3. Don't choose one. Do not choose one. Even if you think, this is a person for me, compare and contrast. Check your decision. Go see 3 and go, oh my God, that first person was definitely the person for me. Yeah. Because you'll know by speaking to it. That initial stance that you take about who you're going to instruct, I think is key. Absolutely key to success.
And it's not because your friend Jane said that they used them and they loved them that they're the right person for you.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. How you feel, how you act, react, and how you bond and gel. I know often coaches like yourself call it a chemistry session. The first session is a chemistry session. Why not? We should have chemistry sessions.
That's exactly it.
I think it is that. We just don't call it that. We just call it the first meeting, terribly formally. But actually, I think it is a get to know you session. And I always say to the client, hey, let's come have a chat. You can tell me what's been happening. I can give you some initial guidance and initial advice, and we can get to know each other.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Let's just get to know each other. Then you can, and I always say to a client, unless there's something really, really, really pressing that would be prejudicial if they didn't deal with it immediately, I'd say you need to go away and think about this. Yeah, even if they say, I really want to instruct you, I'll be like, well, you should sleep. You should go away and think about everything I've said. Have you got any other further questions, first of all? And go away and think about it. Because I think it's such a big decision for people.
It is.
You can end up spending a lot of money, so get it right.
Agreed. And I think one of the other questions that you didn't mention, but I know you use it because I've seen you in action, is, to understand whether your lawyer knows the other party's lawyer if they have instructed someone. Because back to your very first example, having a relationship, if these 2 lawyers are used to working together, they're used to collaborating, you're going to get a very different approach to handling those negotiations than if they've never even met and there's no trust or relationship between them.
I think that is so important. That makes once you've got the client, and once the first thing I say is, do we know who's acting for your husband or wife? And that's going to make or break the case to a certain extent. I mean, these days it's so much better because all the lawyers are all about collaborating and working together. Yeah. It's so much better than it used to be back in the day. And I would say that to be able to say, yes, I know that person, and I've settled lots of cases with them, can give so much comfort to your client.
Of course.
So much comfort. Now, there might be a firm that you might say, well, listen, they're really good lawyers, but they will litigate. We know their kind of MO. So what I'll say to them is, yes, we should negotiate, but let's do it parallel maybe with the court proceedings. Rather than spending all the money negotiating and knowing they'll litigate, then we'll spend all the money litigating. Yeah. Why don't we just understand that we're going to be in a court process, but running parallel to the court process, we will focus really hard on negotiation.
Yeah, you build it into your strategy effectively.
Exactly. So knowing the other side is a winning formula, knowing and getting on with them. And you might, when you're acting 3 lawyers, out of those 3 lawyers, the way you choose might be, oh, you know the other solicitor really well, and you get on with them and you've settled it. Absolutely brilliant. So what we do here at Irwin Mitchell, we do a lot of what we call competitor events. Yeah. So other law firms do them too. So lots of family lawyers are good at this. We all get together to socialise or to have a legal seminar that we all listen to together, and that we share our knowledge and contribute with each other as to how we can raise the bar of excellence in family law. So you will see that in the family law world, lots of the family law solicitors work together, support each other, and or a client might instruct me and I might not be able to do it because of some conflict reason. Maybe we acted for the other party buying a house or doing a piece of litigation, so we can't act for this person because that person was our client. So what we'll do is we'll say, but listen, I can give you 2 or 3 other great stellar lawyers. So we do a lot of conflict work. When we have a prenup client, we might say to that client, oh, your other party's going to need a lawyer. I know that these 3 lawyers are really, really good. They should choose themselves, but we can give 3 really great names of people that we know we work with, that they do a really good job, and we know they'll do it really cost effectively, and they'll really, think about them, but they'll work together and collaborate with us. So knowing the other lawyer is really, really key. And in the small world that we live in now, particularly since COVID, and how we all communicate in different ways, we know a lot of the family lawyers, and
it's a small world.
And I think it makes such a difference.
Agreed. So just one last thing. As you were talking, I realized there's one topic we didn't address, and actually that I think makes a very big difference, is the influence of friends and family, and maybe more family than friends, but these third parties who influence people's behavior and thinking during divorce. And I've seen some cases be particularly difficult, not because the actual husband or wife was difficult, but because they had these pressures from their family really pushing for a much more aggressive approach, for much more conflict with their own moral judgment of what was fair or right, which wasn't aligned to the law. What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tricky, isn't it? Because clients should be supported by family and friends. They need it. It's the crutch in the evening when we're not there, or at the weekend when we're not there. So it's such an important element of their support structure. I understand that. But there can be nothing worse than a friend or family member giving you completely incorrect guidance and advice. And if I think that's happening, sometimes I'll say, why don't you just invite them to the meeting? And I'll say in front of and I'll say, why don't you bring them and let's talk it through together? Because even though I say that to the client, the influence is still going to be there. They'll say, well, I'm not sure she's right. I know it happened to Joe Bloggs down the street, and I know. Or it happened to me, they'll say. And it may well have happened to them. And in that instance, maybe that strategy or that thought process worked, but in this one doesn't. So I say, let's get them on a call. Let's jump on a Teams call together. Let's get them in the room. Let's invite them to the party. Let's bring them up to the table and let me talk it through with them. And I will then look them in the eye and say, if we go down another road or we influence, it would be really damaging. Yeah. And there's more power to say it direct. So, and then I can say, thank you. You being so supportive is great, but we need to do this together. We need to be team client. We all need to be team client. And I think, that team ethos and making sure you've got the right people in the room with the right credentials and the right lawyer on the other side. Chloe, I know you're going to go on, and this is the first in a series of conversations that we're having with you, which you're so kind to do. We really appreciate it. And you're going to be talking to some of my colleagues. we have at Irwin Mitchell teams of excellence, and lots of law firms have, specialist teams. So we make sure that the client is with a specialist team who understands the case, who understands the particular focus there. So we're going to be talking to you about lots of things, but I'm really excited about the grand finale that we're going to do with you as well.
Yes, me too.
The collaboration with other lawyers is key. So we're hoping to jump on another couple of law firms with us to talk to you about how we collaborate and work together. And I think that's going to be really important and valuable. The more we talk, the more we raise the bar of excellence, the more you do your podcasts and we give this information out to the public, the better it will be for any individual separating and going through this very difficult and painful procedure in their life.
I absolutely agree. And I'm very much looking forward to that, because we'll have lawyers from all sorts of different law firms involved. And it's going to show the power that you were talking about earlier of that collaboration, of that, those relationships that are built within the divorce community.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Zahra. Any parting words before we stop the podcast?
I think if you're in a relationship and you're trying to find a way forward, try not to stop talking. Keep talking if you can, even if it's about small things. Small acts of kindness can make a difference. Still make that cup of tea, still do the thing that you did every day for a little while longer, because it'll help the process. Remember, kindness is a superpower, and keep the faith. The other thing I would say is there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
You can't see it yet, but it will burn brighter and you will get to it. Get the right team behind you. You will get through this.
Yeah. Everyone's divorce ends at some point. So there is always that light at the end. Thank you so much, Zahra. I'm looking forward to all the other episodes in this series. They will be coming out once a week throughout the month of January and February 2026. And so thank you so much. It's been brilliant talking to you.
Thank you. Take care now.